All right. So once again, I am Dominique, study abroad coordinator. You are at study abroad pre-departure orientation number 1. Woohoo! You made it this far. So much excitement. So today we already did introductions. I have a bunch of kind of logistical stuff to talk about. I apologize. This is kind of the dry and boring one, but it is important stuff. So that's why I'm going to talk about it, and we'll get it out of the way so the other 2 pre-departure sessions can be much more fun and engaging and interesting. But before we do too much of that, we're going to have a surprise math test. So please take out a piece of paper, or you can do it on your phone or something like that. Please number 1 through 7. This is extremely high stakes. If you do not pass this math test, you will not get to go abroad. No, not at all. This is just a little fun thing. One thing that is a little different about this, though, is that you are not allowed to write down your work. So unlike most math tests where you have to show your work, this math test, you have to do it in your head. You can only write down your answers. And afterwards, I'm not going to collect anything or anything like that. This will be an entirely self-graded math quiz. So the one key thing, is to use the key on the right-hand side of the screen to tell you how to do your math test. There will only be 1 minute to do your 7 questions. So depending on how excited you get about math tests, either you have way too much time, or yay, this will get over quickly. So here we go. 1 minute. Thirty seconds left. Ten seconds left. Time is up. So here are the answers. And is anyone brave enough to hazard a guess as to why Dominique is so crazy as to give you a math test in this study abroad pre-departure session? Surely someone has some idea. A guess. There's really no wrong answer. Yeah. Yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah, it's that whole translation process. So a lot of times when you are abroad, it's not just running into things that are brand new completely. A lot of the things that you'll see will actually be very similar to, or maybe on the surface look identical to, things that are here. But it's going to be a matter of learning to understand how those things are viewed differently and thought about differently as you're there, and you get that cultural context and the history and all those different meanings that they may have associated with it. Honestly, the first couple of weeks, even if you're in an English-speaking country, you may end up being very tired at the end of the day, because it's just a lot of information that your brain is taking in and processing and kind of cranking through, starting to understand things in a different way. So do give yourself some patience and understanding, and maybe some extra sleep if you're able to in all of your excitement, so that you can kind of engage in this and have it be an enjoyable experience. And then one thing that I really encourage you to think about is that as you're going through your time abroad, to really go back to those things that you maybe first encountered and you started to have an understanding of, and think about them in the new context that you have. So the deeper and deeper understanding that you're going to have of the place that you're in is going to give you more shading and more meaning and more understanding of the different things that maybe at first you thought it meant this, and then, oh, okay, there's all these other different pieces that went into that interaction or into what this thing that people do means. And it's just a really great and exciting and interesting way to learn about a place by doing. So in short, you'll experience a lot of different things. You'll experience a different culture, a different language. Even if you're in a country where English is the first language, you're going to run into a lot of different slang and a lot of different ways that people use language in other countries. New food. When I was in Japan, honestly, I did not like fish, so that was a little bit of a challenge. But even if there are things that maybe are not your favorite foods out there, I really encourage you to try different things, to be open to new experiences. Maybe that means eventually going and buying an extra sandwich down the road, but go into it with the spirit of adventure, because you never know the things that are going to surprise you that you just love, and when you get back later, you're going to want to learn how to cook because you miss them so very much. New daily routines. So it doesn't seem like it would make a difference, but even just little things like the daylight hours being shifted a little bit, or maybe you end up, you normally shower in the morning and now you're going to be taking a bath at night or something like that, or taking different forms of transportation. So if you commute on a bicycle or a bus or a train or metro system or something like that, those different experiences really kind of change the rhythm of your day. And that's exciting. That gives you that opportunity to really experience what it's like to be a person who lives in that place and to start to understand what life is like for those people. But just be aware, it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment as you get used to those new types of practices. You'll definitely meet people who dress or look differently. There'll be different ways of interacting. One thing that I think is a little surprising for people sometimes is just as simple as how close people stand to you. They might stand closer or farther away than we're used to here, or things like how much they touch people when they're communicating. Some places are a lot more touchy than we are. Other places, eye contact, they may not be as comfortable with eye contact. We tend to think here in the US of eye contact as being a signal that you're very honest and that you're being upfront and kind of forthright with people that you're communicating with, versus in some countries that is considered to be too direct and almost like aggressive to be doing that. So those types of behaviors, kind of pay attention to them, try to mirror them a little bit, because that'll make your communication with other people more natural, and then you'll start to fit in with that local culture more. And then bargaining. Has anyone had an opportunity to bargain before? Yeah, what was that like? Yeah. Okay. Did you enjoy it, or was it? Yeah. 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 Something different. Did.
I spent last summer in Mexico, so I went to quite frequently, and
Mhm.
that's like a part of it. So it was really cool for me, and I felt like I was cheating them. But then I got more used to it, and so price.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I was visiting one of my friends, she like spoke like the whole time because she speaks Thai.
Yep.
But she was like, and like people started yelling at me. I was like,
Whoa.
they would like approach us because I'm like clearly American, and they would approach us because they thought that they could get a better price from me, and then she would start speaking Thai.
Yeah.
Which was like really.
Yep.
It's like that's sketch, but like
Yep.
I get it.
Yeah. Well, it's understandable. So interestingly, you say Thailand, because I went to Thailand over spring break when I had studied abroad. And so, I mean, imagine cute little college me with my Lonely Planet guide, which was a book at the time. And in the book, it said that in Thailand, that people like to bargain, and that if you don't try to bargain the price down, that they find that insulting, because it's like saying, I have so much money, I can just spend it however I please. So I felt obligated to bargain, even though I was really uncomfortable with doing that. So my very, very poor bargaining skills consisted of, in the market, looking at something, and then someone would say, oh, this is the price. And then I would go, oh, and then set it down and like turn away like I was going to leave. And then the person would be like, oh, but special deal just for you. And then give me a different price. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, bargaining accomplished, done. So people who are better bargainers, please go for it. But even if you're not comfortable with bargaining, there are ways to do it that meet the modicum of expectation without having to have it be too stressful. So okay, so in conclusion, one thing just to remember is that you all have a whole lifetime of experiences and understandings, you know, your entire history up to this point, you have learned how the world works here and in other places that you visited, and you're kind of bringing that frame of reference with you. So as you're having these new experiences, just remember that, you know, they may be a little bit different. They may be confusing and all sorts of different emotions. And this is really your opportunity to have that kind of shift in your understanding and to really expand your understanding of the way that the world is, and to start to understand the experiences of what other people have had. So I just really encourage you guys to come into it with that spirit of adventure, that spirit of excitement, that spirit of being kind of the global scholar who is learning about the world, and to really enjoy this opportunity to grow. And then once you get to the end, you're going to have all sorts of new understandings, and you'll have that ability to go back and think about, oh, this is the way I used to think about things. And now I have this whole, you know, deeper, richer understanding of the world. This is so fascinating to think about how these cultures are different or the same, and to just really realize how much you've grown over the course of your experience. So I'm excited for you. All right, that's the excitement for today. Now I'm going to talk about serious stuff. Hopefully, we'll get through it pretty quick though. So first thing, passports. If you don't have a passport yet, this is an important time to go ahead and apply for that. A passport, generally, normal processing time is about 4 to 6 weeks. Our office is now a passport processing facility, so you can come in and do passports in our office. You do have to make an appointment online, but just go to the Study Abroad website, and we have the link for that. The cost for it, it's $135. It's split between two fees, one for our office and one that goes to the State Department. You do need a certified birth certificate copy because that's what's showing that you are a U.S. citizen or alternative form of U.S. citizenship proof. You also need one passport photo, which the easiest place to get that is the NDSU card office. It's $10 for a set of two. You only need one photo for this, but save the other one in case you need it for a visa application down the road. You can also get passport photos taken other places like Walmart, Walgreens, and things like that. But the one card, the NDSU card office is pretty convenient, and it's only $10, so it's not too bad. You do also need a proof of identity. So usually that's a driver's license and then a photocopy of that. And then there's also an application which you can fill in online and print, or you can just print and hand fill in, and then hold off on signing it until you actually bring it in to do the application. Any questions on the passport? Yeah.
There are two different fees. One is $135 for processing, so different.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so visas. A visa is a specific permission that a government abroad gives you to be in the country for a specific purpose. So this is different from a credit card. A Visa credit card is actually named after this type of visa. So it's like this idea of you can go anywhere with this visa. A visa is usually, for most countries, something that you would get before you go. So it's kind of a pre-approval for you to enter the country. Most of the time, that means that you have to do some sort of application process at some point, and then they put a stamp or a sticker in your passport so that when you show up in the country, the immigration official in the little booth can look at it and go, okay, yes, you are approved, stamp it, and then let you in. Some countries, Germany is one of them, are ones where you do a residence permit instead, in which case people bring some documentation to the country and then they do it after they get there. Depending on the country, though, there's a whole bunch of different processes for it. So this is just kind of a general overview. To find out if you need a visa, first of all, a lot of times in your application or in your acceptance documents from the school, they will have information about the visa process. So that's kind of a first step information piece for you. If you do want to look into it though, or if you receive acceptance paperwork and it doesn't have information about whether you need a visa or not, the other ways to check about that are you can look at the embassy or the consulate for the country that you're going to, and they should have information about whether that is required or not. Usually the consulate for people who are residents of Minnesota or North Dakota is located in Chicago. So that's why my example search up there would be Consulate of Spain, Chicago. You could ask the host school, you could ask me. I work with visa processes a lot. And I meet with people quite a bit as they're getting visa documents put together and getting ready to go, and actually do the application, look through things, make sure that everything's there. Some of the common places that people are going, I'll send out emails too to check in with people to make sure that you have the information that you need well in advance. Usually I start sending those emails out kind of late April, early May for people who would be going abroad for the fall. And then the US Department of State does have some information in it. It does tend to be more towards tourist visas, which are kind of more the short period visas. So it may not be as helpful as those other sources. One other thing about visas, most of the time, people who are going for shorter stays, so going for 90 days or less, don't need a visa. So it's just a longer period of time and for the specific purpose. So for example, being a student in a country for 4 months often requires having a visa. To apply for a visa, it varies by country what that process is, but some of the common things that come up in the visa application process are having a completed visa application. Seems kind of obvious, right? Which is just maybe 1 to 4 page document with information about you, where you're going, what school you're at, that sort of thing. They often will charge a fee, which ranges, I would say, well, Japan's the cheapest, it's nothing. Often I would say it's somewhere between $100 and $200 for a visa fee. Passport photo or photos. So that's where if you have an extra passport photo from applying for your passport, you would save it for that. With a visa application, you do want to make sure to use official passport photos if they need a photo, because they are going to be very precise and very picky about those things. And consulates and embassies have absolutely no hesitation to send stuff back to you if it's not exactly how they need it, which is where it is good a lot of times to have a second set of eyes, take a look at things just to make sure everything is kind of good to go before you submit. And then another important thing to know is that they do usually require your actual passport for a period of time. Usually the earliest that you can apply for a passport is 90 days before you would be entering the country. So that's kind of your time frame for doing the application. And then it varies by consulate, by how busy they are and things like that, how quickly you would receive your passport back. So if you are thinking of doing any international travel during the summer before you would be going, or whatever time frame before you'd be going, make sure that you keep in mind that there will be a certain time frame where you will not have your passport, and that's going to be a little bit out of your control too, how long that would be. Other things that often come up, an original letter of acceptance. So a lot of times we actually receive a paper letter, through snail mail, one of those crazy things, that has a signature and maybe some fancy stamps and things like that, saying that the school has accepted you and basically is sponsoring you for participating in the program. Proof of income, that might be a combination of documentation of savings that you have, or financial aid or scholarships that you're going to be receiving, something from your parents perhaps, that would show that when you get there you have enough funds to be living. Doctor's report is less common. You don't see it a whole lot, but when it is needed, it may be even including things like x-rays to make sure that you don't have tuberculosis in your lungs, or Egypt has an AIDS test. So there's just various types of things that can come up with a doctor's report if it's needed. But like I said, that's not very common at all. And then lastly, proof of insurance, which I'll talk about insurance a little bit more in a minute. But you do usually need to have insurance with very specific limits for that, to show that, again, when you get to the country, if you had any medical needs, you would be covered for any of those costs. And then a really important thing to know is that there are a lot of countries that do require that people apply in person. France, Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, those are some of the big ones. And for people, again, who are Minnesota, North Dakota residents, that often means going to Chicago for that. It's not a big deal, except for the annoyance of going to Chicago. It's just a quick trip to an office. But it is something that you would have to plan for within that 90-day window before you would be traveling, to make sure that you get your visa back in time to go. Again, you may have a time without your passport. It can take 1 to 3 months to get it. So if there is a window of time in which you're supposed to be applying, I do recommend applying as soon as possible within that window. Generally, consulates will not promise to get it back to you within any specific time, though they may have a general ETA on that, just because it does depend on how many they're getting and things like that. So if you apply sooner, you'll have a better chance of getting it back quickly and not having delays that might impact your ability to go to the country. And then, sorry for the big, bold, scary letters. I don't like using scary letters, but this is really important to note. This is a very serious thing. If you don't have the right visa documentation, you can be denied entry into that country. And actually, what generally would happen with that is you would get to the airport here, and the person who's checking you in for your flight takes a look at your passport to make sure that you have the right visa documentation for the period of time that you're supposed to be there. And if you don't, they would actually deny you entry onto the plane. The reason for that is because if the airlines take you to the country and then that country does not allow you in because you don't have the right documentation, that country actually fines the airline for bringing you. So the airlines take it very seriously because they don't want to have to pay those fines. And then anytime you do send a visa or a passport somewhere, that includes if you're able to mail it in or if you had to go in person doing a prepaid envelope to send it back, you want to make sure to only send your passport with some sort of tracking number on it, because if it does get delayed, you want to have some way to track that down. Generally, it is more expensive to do FedEx or UPS, but given the option, that's usually a little bit easier on kind of your mental health in terms of those tracking numbers do give you more information about where in the process your passport is. The US Postal Service does have a tracking number that you can have put on it, but usually it only says, oh, we received the package and the package was delivered and nothing in the middle. They can use that to track it down. I think they actually call post office to track down where that was. But it's just a little bit more stressful if something is delayed to try to figure out what's going on with that. But that said, some consulates do say you have to use U.S. Postal Service, and they don't accept FedEx, UPS kind of envelopes for return. So follow whatever they say. Any kind of general questions about this? If you have any specific questions, please feel free to email or set up appointments with me too. Okay, health insurance. So I have to tell you a sad tale of woe to introduce health insurance. I told you this was going to be a pick-me-up session, right? So my sad tale of woe, well, it's not actually my sad tale of woe. When I was studying abroad, I did not pay attention to health insurance, right? Like I was 19 and health insurance was just really not a thing that I cared about or thought was important because I rarely got sick and it just wasn't a big deal. My parents very nicely checked with our health insurance company before I went to Japan and verified that the insurance that I was under in the US would cover me while I was abroad. And that was as much thought as we really gave to the health insurance piece. And luckily I had no problems. I didn't need it or anything like that. So again, not my sad tale of woe. But I did have a friend who I had met when I first got there, whose name was Meredith, who did have a sad tale of woe, where about a month after we got there, she was riding her bicycle one day and hit the curb. And she wasn't even going very fast, but she fell over at kind of a funny angle and she landed on her arm and she broke her arm. And not even just like a little bit broke her arm, she like shattered her bones in her arm and had to get surgery and a whole bunch of pins and all sorts of things. Just not a fun situation. And the Japanese healthcare system is a little bit different from the way that we do healthcare here, where, you know, if you broke a bone here, they'll set it and, you know, do surgery if they need to, and then they'll send you home so that you can heal, right? But in the Japanese system, they would see that as very woefully negligent, you know, like, oh, this person injured themselves and now you're sending them home all by themselves. So they actually kept her in the hospital for about 2 weeks before they let her go home, before she convinced them that she should not have to be in the hospital anymore for her broken arm. And so came back, everything seemed like it was going to be good. And then she went back after another week or two so they could check what was happening with her arm. And they realized that something had gone kind of awry and that it was not setting properly. So she actually ended up flying back to the US so that they could re-break her arm and then reset it with a different cast, which actually, in the end, turned out to be kind of a good thing. The sad part of this whole story is that when she got the bill for all of the medical care in Japan, what her U.S. health insurance company said was that their policy only covered emergencies. So when she went to the emergency room and they checked her into the hospital, it was no longer considered an emergency. So even though she had to get surgery and her arm was actively broken at that point, because of the act of checking her in, she was no longer in an emergency situation, and they wouldn't cover any of the costs of what had happened. So she was back in the US at the time, had absolutely no way of paying for all of these health insurance bills and things like that. So that was just the end of her year in Japan. The school was very nice, mailed all of her stuff back to her, but it was just a very sad end. So this is all a very long way of saying, I hope that none of you ever need health insurance, but it is really important to have health insurance that is specific for traveling, something that is geared towards the use that you might have while you're abroad. Even if you do seem to have insurance here that would cover you, a lot of times it's either not set up to handle those types of situations, so they're not able to pay for things that might arise, or they would actively try to get out of paying for those types of things. So generally, everyone through your program in some fashion should have health insurance that is probably already set up. If you are doing a partner exchange program or a direct program, we require that you purchase health insurance through our partner CISI. And so this is kind of the overview of what it is that's included with CISI. With ICEP, they have very similar insurance policies, but you pay as 45 days before you leave for their policy. And with the affiliate providers, they have insurance that's already built into the program fee, so you don't have to pay for it separately, but it should be pretty similar in terms of what's included for that. So generally with health insurance, the things that it needs to include are international coverage, preferably with either no deductible per injury or illness or a very small one, something well under $100. Emergency medical evacuation. So that means that the insurance would pay to fly you back to the US if you needed a different type of treatment or to fly you to a different location if a particular place is not able to help. And that includes even little things. So for example, when I worked at Concordia College, we had a faculty member who was with a group of students in Jamaica who had a very minor medical thing that happened, but she ended up having to be flown back to the US for medical treatment because she had a latex allergy and none of the hospitals at the time had anything other than latex gloves. But the medical insurance recognized that that was important, and so they did that evacuation so that she could get the appropriate care. Another thing that's really nice, being in a different medical system, is that if you are sick in the hospital over a certain amount of time, they will usually fly to bring a loved one, like a parent, to come be there with you in the hospital, so you don't have to be alone. As an example of that, this is really the only time that we've had this happen, but a few years ago we had a student who was studying in the UK who over spring break had gone to Greece and tripped on the stairs and broke her ankle. And after 3 days, they knew she was going to be in the hospital for more than 5 days, so they flew her mom in to be with her at the hospital in Greece. And then they also flew her and her mom back to the UK and paid for her mom to be there for a couple of weeks to help get her settled into new housing and things like that so she could have a successful rest of her semester, even though she still had a cast on her ankle at that point. Worldwide emergency assistance, that means that there's a phone number for you to call if there are any emergencies out there or if you need help with finding an English-speaking doctor or something like that. So 24-hour assistance with that kind of stuff. And then also natural disaster and terrorist attack coverage. Again, hopefully none of this stuff would be needed, but it is important to have. As an example, when I was at Concordia, the only time that the natural disaster coverage kicked in was actually in Japan. When the Fukushima disaster happened with the earthquake and the nuclear plant there, for a little while, about a month, Japan was actually on the highest kind of scare rating with the US Department of State because they didn't know exactly what was going to happen with that nuclear reactor. And so we did have a student that was evacuated out of Japan for that period of time, and then they were actually able to go back and finish out their semester. So CISI specifically, their policy is only $39.25 a month, so it's really affordable as compared to US coverage. And these coverages generally work anywhere in the world, so anywhere except the US. For if you need the CISI, so again, that's partner exchange and direct programs, that would be due by May 1st. And it's just something that you do online where you pick the first day of coverage and then how many months that you need, so you can include additional months if you're planning on traveling. And then ISEP, 45 days before you leave is when their deadline is for paying for their insurance. Most affiliate providers, it's included. If you're not sure, please feel free to contact us and we can help you determine what, if anything, is included in your program. So, any questions about health insurance? Okay. Academics. So registration is coming up very quickly. I'm excited. Registration for study abroad is going to be University 492, which is just a temporary placeholder saying that you are a student here at NDSU while you are studying abroad. That means that you can do financial aid, loans. It gives you access to all of the same like, email and those types of things here at NDSU. Going for a semester, we have you register for 12 credits of University 492. Even if you are planning on taking more credits, we have you register for 12 credits because that's the minimum that you need for financial aid purposes. You can still transfer in more. I'll explain why in just a second. And then during the summer, you would generally just register for however many credits you're actually taking on your summer program. Most of the time, anything between 6 and below 12 credits tends to be kind of the same implications as far as financial aid purposes go. If you do get up to 12 credits, you may end up registering for 12 credits for financial aid purposes. But if you have any questions about that, please feel free to contact me. And then the one exception to that is that there are some North Dakota State scholarships that do require that you take at least 15 credits, in which case then you would register for 15 credits and then also make sure to take at least 15 credits abroad so that they would match. But everyone else, even if you're planning on taking more, you would register for the 12 credits. I'll be issuing permits probably tomorrow, and then I'll send everyone an email with exacting instructions on how to go in and register for the University 492. Even though you register for the minimum that you need, you can still take however many credits abroad and have them transfer back. Generally, as far as NDSU is concerned, anywhere in the 12 to 20 credits is fine. Hypothetically, I think you could even take more, but don't because that would be way too stressful. And if you have the option, I generally recommend sticking closer to the 12 credit mark, just because that gives you that opportunity to get out and really experience the culture and to, take advantage of being in the place that you're in. That said, some programs do have their own guidelines in terms of a minimum or a maximum amount of credits, so make sure that you watch that as well when you're deciding how many credits to sign up for. And then that bottom bullet, SAP stands for Satisfactory Academic Progress. That is a financial aid requirement. So when you register for credits, you need to complete at least 66.666667% of the credits that you initially registered for in order to meet SAP and to not potentially cause issues with your financial aid for future semesters. So that's part of the reason why we have you only register for 12, because that gives you flexibility to register for more or less credits while you're abroad. As long as you bring back 12 credits or 66.6667% of the 12 credits, then you will meet the SAP requirement during your semester abroad. Any questions on that? Okay. Academic systems abroad are going to be probably a little different. One key thing that you may notice is just the atmosphere of the classes may be a little bit different. Some places they may have less busy work than we have here. That's actually pretty common, where there might be more of a final project or a final test or something like that, and not a lot of homework that's due up to that point, which is really exciting and awesome and gives you a lot of free time. If that is the case, however, make sure that you exercise all of your willpower and actually do reading and homework and things like that before the end of the semester. Because if you push that all off, it's going to be very difficult to learn a semester's worth of knowledge in the last 2 weeks before your final, right? Also, when you're there, be sure to register for the classes at the school. That usually happens either shortly before you arrive or during your orientation timeframe. So you may have a meeting with an advisor or something like that when you first arrive, and then do the registration process to get things kind of squared away. And then you will probably notice a lot of places abroad use different numbering systems for their credits. So something that is 4 credits here might be 8 credits somewhere else. And so you'll get kind of familiar with how those things transfer back. One really common credit numbering system is the European Credit Transfer System, ECTS, which generally that's a 2-to-1 ratio. So if something is 10 credits, 10 ECTS, that comes back as 5 NDSU credits. And the nice thing about ECTS is that you'll see it in documentation for a lot of countries. Even if ECTS isn't their primary numbering system, they may just list that for kind of people from Europe to be able to understand what the credit numbering is. So that can be helpful for us too, to kind of get an idea. Australian classes, usually 4 NDSU credits. If you're going to the UK, usually students are told to register for 60 credits, which sounds crazy for a semester, but that comes back as 15 credits here. If it is a system that is just completely impenetrable and you don't know how many credits that would be back here, the technical way to calculate that is that 12.5 hours of class is equal to 1 credit. So you can take the number of minutes that you're in class, multiply it by the number of times class meets, divide it out into the number of hours, and then divide it by 12.5, and you'll get the number of credits. And that does come back as kind of an exact number. So it's possible you might have like 4.37 credits come back from a course abroad. There is more information on our academics page. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me and I can help you figure out what that translation is. And a form that may be useful but is not required is the request to waive or substitute courses form. You may have already seen it in your study abroad application under the academics information. This is something that you can use to have courses approved to replace courses on campus for a major or for a minor. Your major or minor department has a lot of flexibility to do these substitutions. So if, for example, you were in engineering and there's a math class that's required as part of that major, they can substitute in math classes even though it's the engineering department because it's part of those major requirements. This does not work for gen eds, that's a different process, but for pretty much everything else, this form works. This is a general form that's used, so it's used for all sorts of substitutions on campus, so your advisor definitely would have seen this form before. It is used slightly differently with study abroad in that there's more flexibility with it. So you can do it before you have registered. So you could have them say, you know, here's a couple of classes that you found. These are ways that they would come back if you complete that and sign off early. They could also say, here's a list of 3 classes. Any of these could be substituted for this class. They could put notes on there about, you know, must earn certain grade level or something like that. And registration and records is going to read all of those types of notes and follow that together with the transcript from the school abroad to do the translation for things coming back. One other thing that's a little bit different is if you do it early or while you're abroad or even shortly after you get back, up until the point where we receive the transcript from the school abroad, we would have you turn it into our office, so into study abroad services, rather than turning it into One Stop or turning it into registration and records. And the reason for that is because the courses that would be on here don't exist at NDSU, and so it's a little bit confusing for registration and records to be receiving forms talking about courses that don't exist. But if you turn them into our office, what will happen is when we receive your transcript from abroad, we'll put those together with the cover sheet and the transcript, and we'll send it all over as one package, and it speeds up the processing for you guys. That is not a hard deadline though. After you get back, after the transcript is received, you can still do this form. You would just at that point turn it into One Stop or registration and records directly, because then they have the transcript to look back on. The only kind of final deadline on doing this form is that you need to do it before you're going to graduate. Give them enough time to process it so that you can graduate on time. I do generally recommend if your department is willing to sign off on it, get more courses approved than you're actually planning on taking, because that gives you some flexibility. Also, get things approved before you go if they're able to sign off on it. Then you don't have to wonder if something is going to be approved. You don't have to wonder if the faculty member who said, oh yes, this will be super easy, we'll do it after you get back, if that faculty member is going to leave and you're starting at ground zero with someone new. You just know that it's done, it's signed, it's taken care of. If you have any classes that you just want to come back as general credits to count towards the total you need to graduate, you don't have to do this form. Those will just automatically come back when we receive the transcript. So no special processing is needed for those. And then also remember that it does need your signature, your advisor's signature, and the signature from the chair. So you would usually start talking with your advisor so that they can sign off, and then you would go to the chair to get that final signature on there. And while you're abroad too, feel free to email it to them and they can just email it to us. So you can do it that way also. And then on the Gen Ed side of things, for people who are taking 3, 4, or 5 credits of University 492, just the act of studying abroad can fulfill either the requirement of cultural diversity or global perspectives. For anyone who's registered for 6 or more credits of University 492, it can fulfill both of those. So if you haven't taken either of those or either of those classes, then studying abroad, just doing it period, can fulfill that. There is a form that you have to fill out, which is the Appeal General Education Requirements form, but it just literally is a checkbox on there. You do it after you return, and then the committee approves it, and then that's just kind of done on the back end. You can also take other classes to fulfill Gen Ed requirements. It is just a little bit more complicated in terms of documentation, though. For those, you do the same form, but you have to give them an appeal that outlines how the class that you took taught you the specific learning outcomes that go with that particular Gen Ed requirement. And there's links on our website, so you can go out and take a look at that. If you are thinking of doing that, it might be helpful to take a look at the classes at NDSU that have been approved to fulfill a particular Gen Ed, because I can give you some idea of classes that are likely to fulfill those requirements. They do not need to be an exact match though. So if there's something there that would teach you those outcomes, but it's completely different, it's not something taught at NDSU, as long as it teaches you those outcomes, you can appeal it and get that approved potentially. If you do decide that you want to do that and you want help with drafting that appeal, please feel free to contact us, because we're very happy to work with you and help you get something put together that would be strong for them to do an approval. Any questions about those? Yeah. Yeah, the Appeal Gen Ed one is a little bit different. You can only do it after you get back. They need to see that you successfully completed the class in order to do it. I wish you could do it before, but that's kind of just the timeline that committee has put on it. Okay, and then one reminder, if you are going to be gone during fall semester, that you will also have to be registering for the upcoming semester during the time that you're gone, or if you're gone for the year, it'll be twice. You'll still just register as normal in Campus Connection. If you do have any classes that you really desperately need to get into for the upcoming semester, I recommend maybe a week before your registration window is going to open that you go ahead and try to log in and just make sure you don't have any problems with your password or anything like that, because it would be the NDUS help desk that would be helping get that reset. And of course, you have a little bit of the time difference and potential delays and stuff like that coming in. And then also keep an eye on your registration date and time, because with the time difference, if you really need to register right away when your window opens, you may end up having to get up at a weird time or log in super early or super late to jump on that. And then before you leave your program, they may at the school ask you for information on where the transcript needs to go. A lot of programs, it's pretty smooth. They don't ask you for that, but it's not uncommon, even if they have the address, for them to just ask. Don't bother to write it down right now, because of course, whatever piece of paper you might write it down on, you won't have. The key thing to remember is that on our website, one of those side links that's up there just says returning to NDSU. remember to take a look at that before you leave, because it does have some bullet points of just kind of general reminders, like make sure you get contact information from people that you want to contact later, and write down any recipes for food you might want to eat, and those types of things. But then it also has both of those addresses on there. And those addresses, because everything's extra complicated at NDSU sometimes, those two addresses are for depending on the type of mail that's used. So one address is for regular mail, one is for express mail like UPS, FedEx, DHL, whatever they might be using. Okay, and then the timeline for everything being processed after you get back is that it generally takes about 1 to 2 months after your program finishes for them to send a transcript. In our office, it actually is usually either same day or the next business day that we process it, but I'm gonna promise a week just in case there's anything going on. And then once we've processed it, you get 2 emails back to back. One says the item transcript from abroad has been changed from unreceived to received. And then the second one just says a document has been attached to your account. So when we process it, we scan a copy of the transcript into your NDSU Study Abroad application so that you can go in and see a copy of what we received. And you can double check and make sure that all of the classes that you took are listed and the grades seem to fit with what you would have expected. At that time, that's when we put together the packet, we send it to registration and records, and then they generally take about 1 to 2 months on their side to do the final processing and get everything showing on your transcript. And I know this is in the application, but just to say it one more time, if you are planning on graduating right after your program is over, because of this processing timeline, it may push back your graduation date to the following semester. Okay, so here is a sample transcript for Jesse Bison. You can see on the right-hand side there, the section for the University 492 Study Abroad, it is for 0 credits. So this was just a placeholder that we had in there. And when they actually receive the transcript and process everything, they're gonna be able to turn that to 0 credits of P. And that means that the semester that you had abroad is not going to impact your GPA. So whatever your GPA was before will be your GPA after this. The key important thing though with that is that you do have to pass at least 1 class for us to give you a P. If you register for 12 credits and then you fail everything abroad, you would end up with an F for 12 credits. So nobody wants that. So please pass at least 1 class. But as long as you pass at least 1 thing, we can give you a P for that for 0 credits. And then over on the left-hand side in the transfer credits, that's going to be where you're going to see on your official transcript the actual number of credits that come back. So it has transfer credit from the name of the university. The number of credits attempted is the number of credits that you register for at that university. And the number of credits earned is the number of credits that you actually completed successfully. So in this particular example, it's 15 credits attempted and 12 credits earned, which means that that person did not pass one of their classes. So it doesn't show the grades on there, but it does show that difference between those number of credits. That said, study abroad does not affect your GPA. That said, if you are looking at grad school or anything like that, those universities often will require that you order the transcript from that school abroad, so they will tell them the grade that you received. Your study abroad credits can count as upper division credits, but it is based on what the university abroad indicates is upper division. So if you take an intro level class and a department here decides that they're going to count it as a 300 level class, because it was intro level for the metric of number of upper division credits, it's not going to count for that piece. It will count as a 300 level elective or whatever they might approve it for, but it wouldn't count for upper level credits. But if you take a class that is an upper division class at that university, it'll come back as upper division credits. Does that make sense? Okay. And then continued on the certain grades abroad. Do I need to earn certain grades? Generally, no. For most people, what happens is as long as you pass by whatever that university says is a passing grade, the credits will come back. But it is important to note that some specific majors have very specific requirements that may apply that are a little bit different. So they may say that you need to earn a certain grade level in order to use credits for certain things. I pulled a couple of examples. These were all different engineering programs. The top one is no grades less than C will be accepted to fulfill a course requirement. That I think is mechanical. That includes gen eds too. So that's not just, electives and specific requirements. And then the other two are more specific, where they're saying certain types of classes require certain grade levels. So if you have any questions about that, if you don't already know what that policy is for your particular major, be sure to talk to your academic advisor so that they can help. And you can also consult the bulletin online on the Registration and Records website. And it's kind of down at the bottom section in the bullets. Any questions about academics? I know, it's a lot. We're almost there. Okay, so financial planning. So I have 3 slides in a row here. Please find the box that applies for your particular program type, and it'll be in the same spot on all 3. So the first slide here is early costs due to NDSU. So these are things that either you've already paid or you will be paying shortly. So partner exchange, the admin fee is the $150 that you paid in your application, and then the health insurance. Oh, I missed updating that date there. It'll be due May 1st. ISEP exchange, paid the admin fee, and then the ISEP health insurance is due 45 days in advance. Direct, very similar. Affiliate, very similar, except they may also have a deposit or an application fee for the program. Charges to your NDSU account for the term abroad. So partner exchange programs, you pay regular NDSU tuition, regular NDSU student fees, and then an NDSU user fee based on the length of time that you are abroad. So up to 90 days, it's $300, and then over that is $500. And that goes to support staff in our office. The ISEP exchange programs, tuition, student fees, and then there's a program fee that is for room and board, and then also an ISEP placement fee that they charge is included in that. We pay it ahead of time and then charge you. And then the user fee. And then the bottom 2 program types, NDSU tuition is waived. So you only have a small amount of student fees, which for 12 credits this year was $67. It might change slightly next year. It's for technical services, and then also student government has a fee in there. With direct programs, most of those we bill through NDSU because of kind of awkward timing for when that comes through. And then the user fee. And then affiliate provider programs, you usually only have the limited amount of student fees and then the NDSU user fee, and you kind of pay the affiliate provider program separately. And the charges paid separately, you can kind of see the list. A lot of that is kind of out-of-pocket expenses, so there's some variation in those pieces. If you are receiving financial aid and loans, those will go into your NDSU account, pay on anything that was due to NDSU on that previous slide, and then you'll get a refund for anything that's over that, which you can use to pay any of the things that are left on this slide here. Just a couple of slides here on kind of financial aid options that are out there. The first one, honestly, the most common for people is to do some sort of private student loans for additional costs that might be out there. Those do usually require some sort of separate application. They are often through a bank or credit union. And the key thing to kind of plan for is that a lot of them do require some sort of cosigner with good credit. So, maybe think about someone who might be able to do that if you think that you might need to take out this type of a loan. Federal financial aid, that requires that you have completed the FAFSA, which has gotten a lot easier in the last couple of years since you can use 2 years ago tax information to do the FAFSA. And then one thing I think a lot of people don't know is that all students are eligible to do an unsubsidized direct loan. It's just depending on what is in your FAFSA, it's going to impact the amount that you can take out in a direct loan. But you can talk to the financial aid office and they can tell you how much you are eligible to take out. Scholarships. Unfortunately, the scholarships in our office, the deadline was March 1st, and kind of the campus deadline for a lot of scholarships was also March 1st, so you may have missed out on some of those. But there are still some scholarship applications out there, so if you are wanting to apply, please do go out, take a look at those. Some of those have deadlines in early April, so you would still have some time to get that in. And then also any external scholarships that you are receiving generally should be able to be used for study abroad, even if they're not at all study abroad related. Because we're having you register for that University 492, you are still considered to be an NDSU student for the time, which makes those things eligible to be applied for study abroad purposes. So please, take a look at scholarships that may apply for your Greek life or because you're left-handed or, all sorts of things that might be specific to you. And then, of course, keep in mind any savings, any working that you might be doing before you go, any past semester financial aid refunds. So if you have anything left over or any extra that you can take out this semester, those can be helpful in terms of early costs. So like if you have an airline ticket that you have to purchase, if you have some aid left over that you haven't taken out for this semester, you could go in and talk to the financial aid office about potentially still taking that out. Income tax refunds, if you have any birthdays or celebrations of any variety that involve gifts, this is an excellent time to tell family members that you would like cold hard cash, because a lot of times they like to support people and get back happy smiling photos in response. It usually makes them feel pretty good. And then the bottom note there, this is from the financial aid office, but I agree with this as well. If you do have any kind of decision point between using some savings and taking out a loan, I recommend using the savings because it's better to not take out money that you don't have to take out in loans, because of course it'll be money that you have to pay back down the road. And then of course, keep in mind pre-departure early costs. We are working with people on budgets pretty consistently these days, but if you do have any questions about what those are, when they might be due and things like that, please contact your study abroad advisor. Some programs, especially affiliate provider programs, they may have earlier deadlines for when people normally have to pay fees for the program. But usually you can do some sort of form. It's often called like a verification of award form. If you're doing financial aid or receiving loans at a later date, to let them know the amount that you're going to be receiving so that they can bump that deadline back to match when you're going to be able to pay that based on when you receive your aid. Loan debt, I'll send out a copy of this PowerPoint so you can click on this, but you can get an idea of what the potential impact is in terms of what your monthly payments might be when you graduate for an amount of a loan that you might be looking to take out. Yeah. And then odds and ends, if you haven't received a financial aid refund before, I really very strongly recommend that you sign up for direct deposit. The big difference between that is that if you sign up for direct deposit, you will receive your financial aid 1 to 2 days after the aid comes into your account here. And then the refund will just go straight into your bank account. So it will be accessible abroad immediately, which is really great. If you do have a check that you are having issued, it usually takes them a couple of weeks and then it goes to your home address and then somebody has to deposit it. And then you have to wait for that check to clear and everything before you have access. Also, if you want to have a parent be able to call to troubleshoot any financial issues, make sure you have a FERPA release out there. Before you leave, if you have any housing, meal plans, parking pass, anything like that that you aren't going to be using, make sure that you cancel that. And then also if you are doing a private loan, be sure that you complete any follow-up paperwork, sign anything that needs to be signed, and keep checking your email while you're gone in case anyone contacts you because there's something that maybe you might have accidentally missed that needed signing. So the big key thing with financial aid, if you do have any questions, talking with the financial aid office is fantastic. We do need to make sure you have a budget before you go talk to them so that they have some kind of concrete numbers to look at. So please contact us if you have not already received the information on how to set up an appointment and don't already have a budget. Okay, so in conclusion, I'm giving you homework, right? Yay! No, this is fun homework. So for next time that we meet, please write a letter to yourself. Think about what you're excited to do, what your goals are, what are you worried about. and bring it to pre-departure session number 2. And you can put that in an envelope, seal it. We're not going to open it. We're just going to give it to you when you get back. So yeah, that is everything today. We'll be meeting again in 2 weeks. Not in this room. We'll be meeting in Badlands, which is kind of, it's got some windows. It'll be much more fun. We're going to talk about travel-related stuff, you know, how to get your cell phone set up for being abroad and stuff like that. And then the last session that we'll be doing will be the one where we'll have returnees and food and t-shirts and stuff like that. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day.